So yesterday I wrote about the media's hypocrisy when it comes to writing hit pieces in reference to Elon Musk, who we know is set to acquire Twitter. The Washington Post has accused him of targeting Twitter employees after Musk offered some criticism of Twitter's top lawyer, Vijaya Gadde. Now, Gadde, who she's appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience, is notorious for pushing Twitter's former CEO, Jack Dorsey, to stop all political advertising on the platform. She was involved in the decision to remove Donald Trump and, according to Politico, a lead architect of the policy approach that led Twitter to clamp down on misinformation. Her hands are a little bit all over the Hunter Biden New York Post debacle as well.
Reports of Gadde crying during a meeting about the Musk acquirement surfaced from Politico, to which former riser and current Breaking Point host, Saagar Enjeti, responded saying, Vijaya Gadde, the top censorship advocate at Twitter who famously gaslit the world on Joe Rogan's podcast and censored the Hunter Biden laptop story, is very upset about the Elon Musk takeover. To which Musk responded saying, quote, suspending the Twitter account of a major news organization for publishing a truthful story was obviously incredibly inappropriate.
The Washington Post then published an article saying that Musk was targeting employees after simply agreeing with Saagar's criticism of Gadde, who's a very well-connected lawyer in liberal circles. 7 hours afterward, Elon replied to Saagar, and the Washington Post article said Saagar did not immediately respond to requests for comment, even though the Washington Post had asked Saagar if he had a concern that mentioning a specific Twitter executive could result in attacks on that executive. What are the responsibilities here? For example, one of the commenters on the tweets made racist comments against Gadde. Others said she should be fired. So this is all questions they had for Saagar at apparently 2 a.m. You can see he shared the email there. So Saagar said he had no idea, obviously, that Elon would get involved, and he accused the Post of a smear job. So if that was confusing, here's the sequence of events. Saagar said, called out this top Twitter official who has taken a very kind of censorship-inclined mindset. And then Elon responded, agreeing with that criticism and saying, yes, blocking the Hunter Biden story was bad. And then the Washington Post says, how dare you target these employees for harassment? And my question is, if just calling them out is targeting them for harassment, then is not the Washington Post, by publishing this article, calling out Elon for harassment or Saagar or and then suddenly, how dumb is that? If you're just expressing valid criticism of someone counts as harassment, and it's valid criticism because Twitter admitted it's valid criticism.
Right.
Jack Dorsey said that decision was wrong.
Right.
So Elon Musk is taking the position that Twitter itself takes about that decision. And that's harassment?
Yeah, it's
Isn't that crazy?
Especially, we're talking about Saagar, someone who's a media person, a journalist.
Right, former host of the show.
Yeah, a news story of a senior official at Twitter. The idea that constitutes harassment, and then moreover, the idea that somebody else's perhaps legitimately harassing or bigoted or hate-filled comment can be attributed to him because they randomly made it on the internet. I had Bernie Bro flashbacks. I mean, that had big Bernie Bro issue. The idea that somebody somewhere is mad online and says that they agree with you suddenly means you're responsible for their behavior. It's an untenable standard, and it's a standard that is always disproportionately applied in one direction. There were plenty of attacks that came down the pike toward, for example, the women of color on the Bernie campaign. There was never any of that same kind of outrage, and it does feel like a kind of weaponized grievance culture that people are exploiting here in this moment.
Yeah, and I specifically want to call out the Washington Post for this because there's now a couple examples of them doing this kind of thing where they try to make the story about how someone is harassing someone by talking about them, but then they are talking about that person.
Right, with a much bigger platform.
Right, are they
like the Washington Post?
When you do that, so at least we have to have a nuanced. So why is it different when you do it? This was kind of the subtext of the whole Libs of TikTok. Article from last week, which I'm not saying it was not legitimate to report on that account. It is an influential account. I think I might have made a different decision about whether the person you actually named them, because incidentally they were not. It was not, their identity was not very important to the story. And now there's a lot of harassment is how it's being described of the person who wrote that article, and I find some of it to be quite vile.
A billboard in Times Square seems a little extra.
Absolutely, I thought that was disgusting. But certainly the person behind the Libs of TikTok account has gotten harassment and death threats because of this. So if harassment is always wrong, exactly what the media is doing is wrong. So obviously it's not always wrong.
It's not always.
We have to have a more nuanced stand than what the Washington Post itself is outlining for examples like when Elon Musk makes perfectly valid criticism.
Yeah, I will say, to play devil's advocate, I do think that there's a different responsibility for Saagar, obviously, than someone like Elon, who is now sole owner of an entire company, talking about employees in a way that raises certain kind of internal HR implications, right? So I remember when I worked, for example, at the Intercept as a journalist, there were some conversations about what you should or should not say about your coworkers on Twitter, or how you should handle disputes in the public forum, because there's different implications when you're working together in a workplace, and that's even between journalists, not in a hierarchical boss junior level. And, we had, there was a similar issue that emerged earlier this week where there was this, report about someone talking about, Kim on the Hill on our show,
right? We discussed that, yeah.
And so there's this, I think there is a problem. I think there is a different kind of critique about whether people are handling internal workplace disputes in the most effective and appropriate manner. And I think that Elon deserves, some scrutiny here. He has in the past, for instance, used Twitter as a bully pulpit to make tweets that were considered to be union busting. And he was, I think sued for it and had to take the tweet down, right? So it is possible for him to use his position of authority as a bully pulpit in ways that I think are actually exploitative and wrong. I don't think, however, that third parties like Saagar tweeting obvious criticisms and open criticisms and admitted to criticisms about board members rises to that same standard.
Right. It's like that's the lens through which they want to cover this story is, oh, look who's going to be targeted for harassment as a result of this. And then I criticize that, and then they respond, and then it's more example. Now this attacks on the media too.
Yeah.
Like they're making themselves the center of a story that this is not a real story. Like the story here was just Elon Musk shares Twitter's own criticism of the things Twitter has done in the past. Now, he responded actually to my piece on Twitter, and he wrote, the Washington Post targets me relentlessly. Their insults could be higher quality. Some are not bad. I gave them 3 stars on Yelp. Little bit of Elon Musk humor there. So
yeah, how many times, by the way, is one of these newspapers going to send an email to someone they're writing a story about with a series of questions, where the questions are so embarrassing that screen grabbing the question and posting them ends up humiliating the outlet? I still remember recently Candace Owens managing to pull this off, and you hate to give people credit, but you kind of have to when they're asked something like, why are you calling the Azov battalion Nazis? And he's like, well, here's all of your reporting calling them Nazis. I mean, at a certain point, not that I'm giving comms advice to any of these news outlets, but they should consider vetting the questions that are going out from reporters to their subject.
And it was 2 a.m. and I'm pretty sure the email said something like, I appreciate a quick response. This is moving really quickly. I'm sorry, I don't know what Breaking Point's taping schedule's like. It's anything like ours. I'm in bed by 2 a.m. I'm like ready to begin the day almost at 2 a.m. to prepare for this show.
Right.
So that was just, that was kind of hysterical. And again, and for Saagar especially, like obviously he did not, like it is valid to criticize. And this isn't some lowly employee of Twitter.
Right.
This is a top policy person who's, it's not personal. She's probably a lovely person, but this decision in particular, the Hunter Biden laptop story decision, was wrong. Twitter agrees that it's wrong. There's really no debate over whether it was wrong at this point, but I noted in the Washington Post article, they did not once mention that was the wrong call, that story has now been largely substantially validated. So are they in denial about that?
Yeah, it's more than a river in Egypt.
Love that joke. All right, well, Team Rising will join us next. Stick around for that.